Just finished an awesome podcast with Damien from the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, where we chatted about all things podiatry and running, from what podiatrists do to barefoot running and my thoughts on that, to treating younger athletes versus your weekend warriors, and my journey from being a podiatrist to a business owner, and even getting fired from my first job and how that lit a massive fire under me to keep pushing and get to where I am now. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it, mate.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, and welcome to my guest this morning, Keain.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now you've got another title. I won't call it a name, but Australian Podiatrist of the Year.
Yes, don't get referred to that quite as much as my actual name, but yeah, that is a title I sometimes go by.
We should take that on, like one of those Scottish laird things you can buy on the internet.
Add it to the birth certificate. Yeah, it'd be a nice little memento.
Look, congratulations on that achievement. I often say in shows I interview the best people in the world, so now I've got the best podiatrist in Australia. What if we just roll off there, because I think it's going to get us some segues from there. What did that involve? What made you the best podiatrist in Australia at that time?
Yep. So the reason I got into it in the first place was my business partner Mel. She actually won the award 3 years ago, so 2019, or 4 years ago now. Yeah. So that's how I first heard about it. And she really enjoyed the process, like the awards night. And sort of after that, it was good for the business too. So she was like, oh, you should go for it. And I was like, okay, why not? So I entered in to a pool of, I think it was 103 podiatrists in Australia. And then you have to put forth like a written reference yourself. And there's 5 categories. So it was like what you do for the community, what you do for the profession, innovation, technology, what you do for the team. And there was another one too, maybe for your clients. I think the other one was. And so all of those had to have an 800-word section that you'd sort of write for each of them. And then it goes to a board of sort of 20 allied health people in Australia. So not just podiatrists, but, dietitians, physios, that kind of thing as well. And then from there, they picked the top 5 and we went to Sydney. And then from there, I was, lucky enough to win, which was cool.
I really like that process. It seems even if you don't get to win or place, at the very least, you've got a really good self-reflection on you and your profession.
That's exactly right, mate. And that's the biggest thing I took from it was, I think sometimes in our day-to-day lives, we get bogged down in what's next and not sort of how far we've come. So it was really nice to reflect on the past few years and be like, oh, I've done some really cool things in that time that I'd forgotten about. So yeah, that was nice.
Absolutely. And it may show some weaknesses. What if you weren't contributing to the community, as you said, and you actually felt like you could, or you felt like there was a bit missing? It just shows, almost call it like turning the dials, and it shows if those dials aren't turned up to the right level, and even for business success.
Definitely. And I think you need to hit all of those factors, all of those areas pretty well to be successful long term. You can't just dial in technology and have no connection with people and vice versa. So yeah.
And that reminds me of I mean, you're a bit of a social. I don't even know how we connected, but your social media is brilliant.
Thank you, mate.
The comedic tone you take. I mean, you could have 2 careers. You're very good at stand up.
I don't know if many people would agree with that, but I'll take it, mate. Thank you.
Good man. I remember one about the life coach that you did, and it's classic, isn't it? The life coach or online sort of person. They're missing a few things, and normally they're coming from such a bad place themselves that they're almost watching their self-improvement online.
Yeah, I take the piss out of life coaches a lot. I think there's a lot of people in the coaching space that shouldn't be in there, but there's definitely some good coaches. And I work with some great coaches myself. So sometimes I'll post things and they'll message me like, hey, is this about me? And I'm like, God, don't stress. A bit close to home. It's not about you. But yeah, I thought taking on the persona of a 22-year-old life coach was quite a humorous thing. And it actually came from, I had a client probably 3 or 4 years ago now who was a 22-year-old life coach, and just picking her brain, I was just like, oh, love, what are you doing?
It's nice to get that reality check, but also to be able to have a laugh at yourself and reflect as well. I do it with so many guests. One was Dan Cooper, 18 years Australian SAS, and he'll be a PhD pretty soon, I think.
Awesome.
Really interesting cat. And we talked about the evolution. We're in our 40s now. He's a dad. Back in our 30s as a shooter, you just keep all that knowledge in you. You're not ready to share and things. And now it's just like blah. Just have my knowledge, share it out there. Let's get that knowledge transfer and maybe some wisdom, but definitely some age out there with others. And yeah, I think it's really important to be able to be humble enough to laugh at yourself, but also share that wisdom out rather than hold it in.
Definitely. What was the turning point for you, do you think, going from sort of having all that information inside and then sharing it with the world?
That's really interesting. I think special forces did it in my teaching. I was sort of the problem solver with the specific thing of teaching how to shoot a pistol straight. So you've got the bell curve of people, and for the people that don't know what a bell curve, I don't really know, but most of the people in
Sounds
the
good
middle,
though. We'll roll with it.
there's outliers, and the couple of guys that couldn't get it on the standard instruction, instead of being yelled at or put under massive pressure, maybe I'd pull them aside and have a quiet word and get a different approach, and that sort of got me an idea. But then maybe moving into fireys was I suggest the turning point, and having to deal with the community, and then having to deal with such a small team and actually talk about maybe your feelings, maybe how that went and so on. We debrief after traumatic incidents or even non-traumatic, um, in actual non-aggressive way that we did in the special forces. So I think that was probably the turning point when I'm just starting to open up to the guy beside me. So here you, and maybe to a greater person. And as I'm answering your question, thank you. What it was in the fire, what is in the fire brigade is I may not come across a job for 20 years, but talking to a guy about one job that he did 10 years ago that was the same may save my life. So it's important to talk about those things. How was the night shift last night, mate? And I saw you had an interesting job, and actually talking it through, because that knowledge transfer might save your life, or I might be able to save someone else's life in 10 years' time.
Definitely. And I think people that are older than us have that wisdom to share. And I think it's silly not to kind of pick their brains a bit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love sharing, and that's what this show's about. So I guess that is the right segue to what does a podiatrist do?
So, very broad sweeping question, and depends who you ask. I think there's podiatrists that do a lot and some that just are very like niche down. So, for myself, it's anything foot, ankle, and lower limb related. So, basically anything below the knee. And in our clinic, we are very sports based. So, MSK, sporting injuries, active people, that kind of thing. We also do nails and skincare. So, things like ingrown toenails, thick nails, infected nails, callus, corns, that kind of thing, warts, and then also kids' feet as well. So things like Sever's disease, in towing, that kind of thing. So it's a pretty broad spectrum, but I'd say for myself personally, mostly sport related, which is cool.
It is a broad spectrum. And what's the qualification? What's the education process? Is it along the lines of physiotherapy, a bachelor's degree, or what is it there?
Yeah, bachelor's degree. So 4 years. I did at Uni SA City East in Adelaide here. So
Yep.
yeah, 4 year degree.
You said MSK?
Yes, musculoskeletal therapy. So anything sort of muscle, tendon, ligament related.
Yep. It's changed so much. I broke my ankle in 1995 and saw a podiatrist and a physio. And compared to, turns out I've broken my other ankle now with a stress fracture. It's just about fixed. I saw a great podiatrist here in Perth, at Peak Podiatry, and it's changed so much. I mean, the treadmill, the camera, all those things. That's decades ago, but even now they're so advanced in their clinical skills. It's really helpful.
Definitely. Definitely.
That's what I wanted to push on to next is how can podiatry help enhance performance? Because you said you deal with a lot of sports sort of related um, events, I suggest, but how does it enhance performance in athletes?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of runners, and basically the crux of what I do is I calm stuff down and I build it back up. For some people, that might need a custom orthotic, a change of shoes, but everyone kind of gets strength and mobility training as well. So yeah, calming things down, whether it's a flared up muscle, a tendon, or maybe a stress response, and then building it back up so they can run safely again through various tools.
And that's tough because the running crowd, and I've been there with the ultra stuff, and know a few people around there, and they're a tough breed to sort of slow down. So
They are.
Building it
They
back
are.
up must be difficult.
Definitely. And I think with those people, you've got to pick your person. And I run a fair bit myself. I've done marathons and ultras before. So I get that you don't want to stop and have no training because it's like a
Mm,
bit of a mental thing. So we've got to keep them moving, whether that's on the bike with some reduced running, maybe an anti-gravity treadmill, which we've got at the clinic as well, to take their body weight down so they can still do their runs, but with less body weight. So things don't get
nice.
up. So we find a way to get them through. Very rarely do I stop someone running unless they've done a full fracture.
Yep. Yeah, look, my one was interesting. I'm quite stunned. I was speaking to a podiatrist now. Turns out I actually had a stress fracture that essentially cracked, and without diagnosing, I was in a moon boot for 6 or 7 weeks. So actually, lucky that the fracture had healed, because after so many years of seeing ultra runners, the old stress fracture one takes so long. My suggestion there is often take the short term gain of putting it in a moon boot or something, and then do the rehab, which is a shorter period.
Definitely. I'm the same as you. I think go hard, go early, like get it in a boot, offload it, and then you're much better off in the end. I think people that kind of mess around and don't want to go in the boot, they're in, then they're out, then they're doing stuff, tend to have a bit of a longer rehab journey. But yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it's whatever they can handle, and it's interesting. I guess all we can do is lead the horse to water and give them our information for them to drink.
Definitely. That's all it is. Like give your best information, best recommendation. Hopefully they take it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you've got to work with kind of what they want to do. But I'll get there in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched on social media before, and then I'm going to come into something else. Yeah, you're using a platform there, which is pretty rare for someone in that field. Um, and you've got a kind of a unique business. I looked on one of the shows that you did, and it looked like you've pretty much gone from um, you got to business success quite fast. So maybe if I get my questions right, how how did you get your business success? Because it's looking successful, and I'm suggesting it is from what you've said. And then what are you using your social media? Is social media a part of the business plan? Those two questions.
So we've got two social medias. So one's the business one and one's my own personal one.
Yep.
My own personal social media, I have a bit more free reign with it. I probably swear more than I do in the clinic, and I can kind of be a bit more myself. I can take the piss out of people and that kind of thing. And the reason I started that was because I looked around at, I guess, the podiatry community, and it just was stale, like it was boring. And the problem we're having at the moment is there's not as many podiatrists coming through uni, so it's
Right.
not an attractive career. And I thought, geez, if I looked at social media as an 18 or 20-year-old and I saw the podiatrist, I wouldn't go in there either. Like I was lucky that I just knew a podiatrist, so I went in there and I thought
Right.
that was cool. So, but if I didn't have that and I saw it online, I wouldn't be attracted to it. And so I thought, how can I make the profession not as stale, not as boring, but how can I also attract good team members who I think I would gel with to our team in the future? And I thought the best way to do that is by being myself, taking the piss a bit, but also having fun.
That's awesome. I love the word use the word attraction. Um, you, I was talking to with Gary Fahey Strongmen yesterday. He used to run the Prime Minister's bodyguard team,
Yeah,
um,
cool.
and we're talking about mental health and psychology as psychologists. And a lot of time you've got to gel with that person. You got to go through the right ones to find. And same thing with doctors, with podiatrists, physios. If you don't speak the language for the type of people that you're trying to speak to, I mean, imagine if you had a an Instagram model, female, versus a special forces guy versus an ultra runner. They're going to need sort of different things, different communication styles. And you've nailed attraction there, not only in the people you want to work with, people that you want to help as well.
Definitely. And it's helped, I guess, my client list because people that see my social media, they kind of know who I am and what I'm about. So I don't really attract dickheads anymore. It's just all people that I like because they're like, well, I'm not going to go see him because we won't get along. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's worked really well.
Now the reason I pushed that, and I was absolutely stunned when I found out, and I was much older when I found out because when young, we're not too bright, is the number one determining factor in a weight loss um, or fitness program. The number one determining factor that they found, I can't quote the study, sorry, was rapport with the trainer. And it had the list of things. It was a quiz, and I did not choose rapport with the trainer. And it reminded me, I was 22 years old, very skilled, the best in New Zealand at bodybuilding. Back then, it was just lifting weights and dieting. I mean, let's be real. Um, and I was always wondering why I I apologize to the audience in advance, but the blonde bimbo trainer or the young, beautiful looking person that had done like 3 months of education was going really well with clients, and she knew nothing. And I thought, why is that educated person listening to her? And I realized it's because she had a great rapport with that person, was actually going to get great success. So what I'm getting towards is, you don't have rapport and don't gel with that person, there's no adherence. I wouldn't listen to a thing you say if I don't like you, and I'm not going to believe you, am I?
That's spot on. I actually had this exact conversation with a fourth year student who was observing me yesterday at work. And after the first client, I was like, "Oh, do you have any questions, mate?" And his name's Mitch, his gun. I thought he'd ask me something clinical. And he was like, "Oh, I just noticed you just talk a lot to them." And I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "Mitch, I'll give you like the secret sauce so you don't have to learn it later, is the most, the thing I do the most in the clinic is just talk. So I can say the exact same information to a client that I'm saying right now, but if I don't like sort of warm them up and make them build that rapport, make them like me, it just goes over their head. They're not responsive, they're shut down. But if I ask them, how's your work going? How's your family? What do you do for, what are your hobbies? Oh, awesome. You watch that TV show? I watch this TV show, that kind of thing. They're much more receptive. And I still deliver the same information. There's nothing new, but they're much more receptive. So definitely building that rapport has been massive for me. I didn't know that at the start of my career. I just went in there with like all the evidence, all the research, and people were like, what are you talking about, systematic review? Like, it didn't hit home. So yeah, a lot of what I do is just talk to people. I sound like a
It's
cheap therapist.
yeah, exactly. It's great to have that self-reflection, and more important, action it. You have to take action on things there. And the educated you and me at some stages would just be going, hey, just listen to this. Here's a study. This shows it. This shows it. Just do the thing. That's what we would have done in the unit.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a bullet that does this. Okay, good. That's the thing. Um, but
Yeah.
it's very different with the general public, right?
Definitely. I think as men, and this is a very broad generalization, so I hope people don't get offended, but as men, like, we're pretty analytical, just pretty logical. So if I said to you, what's the best thing to do? And you told me, I just do it because that's the best thing. But some people aren't like that, especially women as well. They need to be talked to and have empathy and communicated to in a different way than what you and I are kind of used to. So
Yeah.
that was definitely a big learning curve for me when I was younger and just a bit dumber.
It reminds me, and I think it might have been Jordan Peterson that said it, that men and women, um, or males and females, whatever you want to call it, they problem solve differently, and neither of them work. So man will, you and I will have a talk. Joe, what do I do for this? You say do this. I go good. A couple of women sit down, have a coffee, and for an hour they talk around all the nuances of this thing, and no action. Well, in fact, I'm sure it was Jordan Peterson. In fact, neither of those are a full model, because you and I didn't talk around the nuances, and then the females didn't get the action. What you need is actually a bit of both, which is literally what you said after that, before that fourth year student that you did.
Yes. And like a perfect example for this for me is with my fiance Connie. Sometimes she'll just want to chat about a problem and I just want to solve it because I can just see the answer. I'm like, you just do this, but she doesn't want the answer. And if I give her the answer, she's like, you're not listening. And I'm like, but I'm trying to help you. So that was definitely a big learning curve for me, just to talk through the problem rather than just try and solve it straight away.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want comfort, or do you want a conclusion here?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. So barefoot running, we've got a discussion there. So I've had one guest on the show, Barefoot Ted, nicest guy ever, and he was actually on the Born to Run sort of adventure with Chris McDougall. He invented the lunar sandal from that. Um, I'd like to get a broad brushstrokes of your ideas on barefoot running, and maybe we can go back. I'll probably spur some things on history, but the general public, the Vibram shoes, barefoot running, what's the go in this sort of 2023 on your take of things?
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting topic, and one that I think can get quite heated depending on who you're talking to. I think the
Mm.
barefoot runners obviously hold that very strongly, and the non-barefoot runners hold it very strongly as well. So I like to think I'm more down the end of the not barefoot running spectrum, but I've got clients that barefoot run. I've got friends that barefoot run, so you can't be completely shut off to it. With the barefoot running, I guess the Vibram shoes and that kind of thing, the minimalist shoes, I feel like they're a bit cyclical. So sort of like every 4 or 5 years, it kind of comes back into the scene and people get into it again. I think the biggest problem that I see clinically with barefoot running is there's no issues to it if you build it up slowly, but people go from 0 to 100 without building it up, and they end up with things like stress fractures, injuries, that kind of thing. So that's probably where I have issues with it, is that sometimes it's pushed as, oh, just swap now, you'll feel better. But people need to transition over kind of a 6 to 12 month period. So yeah, I think being smart's the main thing with barefoot running.
And 12 months is so short. When I trialed it, 12 months was the minimum to get back up to 20 Ks. And I was sore for a year in my soleus. Every morning I'd wake up and, that first step out of bed,
Yeah.
sore. And I know what I'm doing, and I had the patience to it for a year. But so many people, they want to take the pill, they want to take the shortcut. They go, oh, barefoot running, I'll take that, I'll put that shoe on. It's a skill that are you seriously asking a 30-year-old to undo 30 years of training in sneakers?
Yeah. And look, it can be done. I'm not completely against it. I still go to the Oval and barefoot walk around. I change shoes often, so I'm getting some variety. But yeah, the classic barefoot client that I see that's come in because they're injured is they had a friend that said, oh, get these Vibram shoes because they've helped fix my back. They thought beautiful. Not taking into account that their friend is a lot fitter and a lot more mobile than them. They're a bit of like an IT guy or sedentary job. They swap into these new shoes, great for the first week. Back feels better. We're moving a bit different, but then knees hurt, shins hurt, plantar fascia hurts, Achilles hurts, got a stress fracture. And so I think that's where I have the issue with it. It's just that kind of going hammer and tong into it without kind of having that slower build up and the sensible approach.
Really comes down to knowledge of where it's come from. I mean, you seriously wouldn't do my bodybuilding program that I've been lifting for 37 years and just go and try and do my workout. Jess has a laugh. She says, your warm-up is someone's workout. Um, and that makes sense. But going to barefoot running, I mean, thinking back to the original book with Chris McDougall, he was at his doctor's office and went, well, hang on a sec. You can't say I can't run. That's not really a proper human. And he researched for a long time, years, to get to that level. And I think people don't even know where that came from, the idea, and they sure as hell don't train up to that from where they started.
Definitely. And I think the clients I see anyway, and I can only speak from experience, but a lot of the time when they go from a normal shoe to a barefoot or minimalist shoe, they're trying to fix a problem without probably addressing what the actual problem is caused by. So they've got a sore back, but they've addressed no core strength. They're really tight. They sit all day and they think, new pair of shoes, fixed. So like there's some other factors going on. And it doesn't mean we can't transition to a barefoot shoe, but let's address kind of the whole body and not just like the one thing that's an easy fix.
Thank you. That ties it up in a nice bow. You mentioned stress fractures. I've got that personal bias towards that, but I've actually talked to a few people lately. I remember back in 2001 when I was doing some education around exercise rehab, and there was a sort of a spate of injuries there from poor food quality that some people were putting it down to. Stress fractures, what are you seeing in the last few years? Are they on the rise? Are they going down? What's going on there?
I think I'm a bit biased to say they're on the rise purely because I see more because I'm in that running community more now.
Yeah.
And because I've been doing it for a while, more people come to see me. So from my perspective, yes. But I think there's a multitude of reasons that someone gets a stressy. So most of the time it's increasing load too quickly. So they sign up for an event in 6 weeks with no training and just try and bang it out.
Yeah.
A lot of the time it's poor sleep over a long period of time, not getting enough nutrition, especially those younger athletes, say teenagers, especially females who aren't eating enough. They've maybe got some puberty, body issues sort of coming to the surface now that they're kind of growing up. And so they're not eating as much as they should. They're training more because they're in these elite groups. And that's where that issue comes from. So yeah, I think there's a few reasons people get stressies, and I think they're on the rise, but only from my own personal bias. They might not be.
Yeah, a little bit of confirmation bias perhaps, but it's relevant in this conversation because you're in the
Definitely.
field. I'll come on to females and possibly amenorrhea. I'll come back to that. Looking back at this actual show, the Straight to Mind and Muscle podcast, the very first guests they ever had were Jason and Mira Kelton. And that was a 3-part show because those guys, wow, they've got so much information. And the reason I say that is I was talking to a guy with a stress fracture yesterday and relating this story to him. Mira was in her 30s, like 32, and a Los Angeles fashion writer, young and in the health scene of food. and she was diagnosed with severe early onset osteoporosis.
Mhm.
And she thought her nutrition was good. Long story short, she met a professor, Jason Kelton, and they supplemented up her. And after 2 years, bone density scan normal.
Mhm.
That bone density was from literally poor nutrition. You talked about sleep there, which we'll touch on as well. So the current nutrition and sleep, the recovery for those younger people, it's pretty important. Um, they're obviously missing some crucial parts if they're getting stress fractures.
Definitely. Yeah, the body's just not recovering. So whether it's from too much load, not enough sleep, not enough nutrition, normally a combination of the three,
Yeah.
poor footwear, that kind of thing, playing multiple sports and not getting an actual rest day. So that, they might be running in a running group, but they're also playing basketball and footy. So there's a lot of load. There's 2 trainings a night sometimes. And yeah, just not getting that recovery.
Yeah, the recovery is so important. I was so lucky to interview Nick Gill, the All Black strength and conditioning coach.
Mhm.
And he said the young professional guys coming to him, so they're either coming into the All Blacks or training for that, they'll come to him and say, Nick, what can I do now to get me another year at the end of my career? So to make it longer, or what can I do now to when I retire at 35 to not be broken for my family? And that was really refreshing to see that they're being proactive. But I think what you're sort of saying is these people are they're relying on their age and their hormones to get through and not thinking long term.
Yeah. And I think it's hard when you're young too. Like I remember being young and being a bit dumber than I'm now. I didn't have that foresight. Like your brain doesn't work like that.
No,
And it is sometimes really hard to tell a 15 or 16-year-old athlete to, hey, let's rein it back in. Let's miss 1 training a week just to keep this load down. Because they're like a bull out of gate. They just want to go, go, go. So yeah, it is a bit tricky at times.
it is. You mentioned sleep as well, and I can't remember his name. But there's a very interesting guy who's sleep and nutrition. I'd say coach. He's not a clinician, but he was a track athlete, 400 meter, 800 meter runner, and I think at about age 14 or 12, he actually snapped the ASIS, the front part of his pelvis, clean off when he was running because his bone was so poor. But turned out he actually just ate burgers like every night. He lived with his grandma as a poor situation. But that, I'm really trying to think of his name, Sean, I think it is. Um, that spurred him to research and start to cook at a teenage year and go, hang on a sec, I'm in hospital. The doctor wants to put me in a wheelchair. I was just running at a state level, whatever that means. I need to be proactive and step up to this. Sean Stevenson, I think, is his name, and
Mhm.
he talked about sleep and nutrition. And it was so powerful. But what a tough lesson to learn at that age.
Definitely. Yeah, having any sort of fracture like that's never a fun time, especially when you're young.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I said I'd touch on amenorrhea with females because that's a slightly different one. Because you said getting into elite sort of groups. Are you that? I'll let you go actually and explain what that could possibly do to a female's bone density and stress fracture risk.
Yeah, so I'll kind of speak on what I know. Obviously, I'm not a young female specific running coach, but I do see these athletes every now and then for foot and leg injuries. So I guess the average athlete that has these issues is say 16-year-old girl, stress fracture, either sort of foot or shin or something like that, high level runner, has recently joined a more elite team. So gone from juniors to kind of the senior group. So they've added more trainings. Trainings are harder, more intense. They've started training earlier during the year as well. And there's
Yeah,
no kind of off season. They do cross country in the winter. And they're just not recovering. And a lot of the time it comes down to they're not eating enough for how much they're training.
yeah,
But then there's that other, I guess, psychosocial factor of they're kind of aware of their body a lot more now. They start liking boys or girls, whoever they're into. And so it becomes a bit more conscious for them. And so they might not eat the foods that they used to eat because they're worried about putting on weight or getting fat or maybe not being light enough to run or compete in the event they're in. And if over a longer period of time, that's where those issues come in. So they're training more, but they're not getting the nutrition and then they get injuries.
I'll just note down the time there because that's key. And if anybody's listening, please just literally rewind a minute and a half and listen to Joe. What you said there was so much to unpack. the female athlete triad, and now they're actually calling it the athlete triad because males just don't see them lose their period.
Yeah,
Let's be realistic, males don't get periods. um, but that's exactly what you said, that they're not actually eating enough. They're not recovering, but then you've thrown body image on top of that, and that changes the whole dynamic so much. But that just not eating enough is stunning. You've, I think, not only seeing a podiatrist, maybe if you can, getting ahead of the curve, but maybe seeing a nutritionist getting ahead of the curve as well would be pretty clever.
definitely. And a lot of the running clubs I work with have a, dietitian or nutritionist. A lot of the time they're female too, that will work with those younger girls, and not even to scare them or anything like that, but just get ahead of that curve.
Yeah.
So by the time they get to that age, they're already aware of what they're eating, and it's a normal thing. It's not like this, oh, now I've got a coach tell me what to eat. It's like, yeah, it's just welcomed.
I love that you said that. Jess is a nutrition and hormone specialist, but she's got a story with her boys. They were very sick, and they've had to be not eat gluten or cakes when they go to a birthday, and they eat a lot of salad and a lot of vegetables. And because she was doing that from literally I think 4, 5, 6 years old, they're ahead of the curve. That's now a normal thing. There's no stigma attached there, because
Mhm.
that's a good thing to do in their minds. It's getting ahead of it. I would definitely recommend anybody listening, that would be a great thing for a young, the parent of a young female, especially in the athletic sort of world as well.
Definitely. And I think it's important to note too, when I'm having these appointments with these younger girls, I'm not like first appointment, I'm not digging deep on what they eat and how their period's going, things like that.
Exactly.
It's very much just like building that rapport, trying to pull a feeler of things about their training out of them and kind of going from there. If I feel like there is a bit of a red flag, it's probably I don't bring it up to appointment sort of 3 or 4, and I might chat with the parent before I chat to her,
Yeah.
because otherwise it can come across really awkward for that young girl if there's a 30-year-old male being like, how's your period going? What are you eating? That's really uncomfortable too.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a thing I go just straight out the gate with. It takes a while to build up to that and build
Yeah,
that rapport.
absolutely. And I'm sure the parents are aware of, and I think as good parents, we are trying to do the best for our kids, and we can't. The 2023 world, as Dan Cooper said, has changed. So instead of just going, well, that's the way it is, we've now got to step into that, and maybe put that extra effort in. And I guess that is what we've been talking about, getting ahead of the curve. If we can tie a bow in the sort of athlete and younger athlete cohort that you work with, what about the older weekend warriors type? I'm sure that you got a few there. I'm almost 50, I'm still trying to do what I did when I was 30. So what about this crowd, 30, 40, 50? How could someone like that benefit from seeing someone like yourself in the clinic? What do you sort of do for those people?
Definitely. And they're probably my favorite group of people to work with. The people that just want to be active and be better. They're not trying to be an athlete. They're not trying to, run all these events and make a career out of it. They're just doing it for health, well-being, fitness. I love those guys. So what I recommend to those guys, even if they've got no issues, is come in for an assessment. We'll look at feet, we'll watch the way you walk, watch how you run. We'll look at shoes, we'll test strength, mobility. We'll put together a really good picture of how you're going and what potentially might come up for you. So for example, someone might come in, no issues, going well, but they want to start doing a bit of running. But on their one side, their right side, they've got Achilles weakness and calf weakness. That is, more than half their left side. So potential for Achilles and calf injuries, but also injuries to that plantar fascia when they increase load. So kind of getting ahead of that is let's build your strength up and let's load through running slowly so we avoid any pitfalls in the future.
Yeah, really clever. Really clever. It's just in New Zealand, we have a warrant of fitness on a car. Every 6 months, it has to go in and get checked. Over
Yeah,
here, it's just cowboy world, do what they want. But the same thing with the body. Really cool to get a check in with your body, check in with your bloods, and just find out where you're at. Otherwise, things creep up on you. And as a 30-year-old going, oh, my age isn't helping me anymore. I've now got to actually do something about this, and they're starting to move more. Really clever idea to get a check in there. And as I said, sort of halfway into this, I saw a podiatrist in the last 6 months, and I was stunned at the level of knowledge they had, and was really happy and really proactive as well.
definitely. We've come a long way. Even when I started, we've come a long way with the technology and the testing that we do and the treatment we can provide. Yeah, it's come a long way.
So I do the video intro and audio conversion, and it's already talked about where you are and things. But where, what is the clinic that you're working out of?
So I'm a part owner in a clinic called Podiatry in Adelaide, and we've got 2 locations and with a team of 5.
So 2 locations, team of 5, partner. How long have you been doing podiatry for?
So I graduated end of 2016. So I've been 6 years out now, and I've been 6 years with PodFit. Had a couple of other jobs at the start. Got fired from my first job. Second job didn't really like. Third job, lucky charm.
Awesome. I love that. It's like Henry Ford. He failed so many times, but he's a success. Let's then talk about that journey to literally having 2 clinics. So that's success and being a partner in that. How did you go from being fired to success in business?
Got fired week 3 of my first job, and the boss basically called me in one day, and she was like, "Look, you're not that good. I don't have time to train you." And I was like, "Cool." So that
Wow.
was the end of that. But it was the best thing that happened to me because it lit a massive fire in me. Because I was
Yep.
like, I don't think I'm not good. I just think I haven't had enough training yet because I'm 3 weeks into my career. So
Yep.
I was like, right, I'm going to prove her wrong. And that literally spurred me on to just do a lot of PD, a lot of sort of personal development, and really be the best pod I can be. So it was a blessing in disguise, even though at the time I was like, oh man, that sucked.
That's hard. I'd say it's hard, especially for an Aussie male to take. Um, that, how did you process it? Let's dive into that a little bit because that's a tough thing. Did it immediately go? I mean, there's fight and flight there. There's denial, all those things. What did
Yeah,
it take to get you up to going where you are now?
it was a massive shock to the ego. And I think you're right, being a young male, being told they're a bit shit doesn't happen that often. Well, at least hadn't happened much to me in that
Yeah,
realm. So yeah, I think there was definitely a lot of ego stuff that came up. I wanted to fight her on it. I wanted to like tell her that like, no, you've made a mistake. But I remember it happening. I was sitting in a room with her and she'd sat me down and told me I didn't have a job anymore. And I was like, I could feel it sort of welling up inside. And I was like, you know what? It's done. I'm gonna let this go. I'll go deal with it when I get home. I was just like, okay, look, no worries. Like, thanks for the opportunity, and left. Called my mum and was like, hey, mum, just got fired my first job. She was like, oh, okay. And then rang around, set some other jobs, see if I could get some work there, and picked one up in a couple of days, which was nice. But yeah, from there, to be honest, I thought about that a lot. I thought about sitting in that room getting fired for a long time. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and be the best pod I can be. So when I came to my job, Podfit Podiatry, now as an employee 6 years ago, after that, I just wanted to jump in head first and try and do as much as I could, try and be a really good pod. And I was still a bit shit, to be honest, because I was still new. But I knew that if I kept putting in the effort and I, sat in with other pods and other mentors and kind of became a sponge, that I could become a lot better.
That's what I've been trying to get out of you for the last 40 minutes. Thank you for opening up about that experience and then how you actually grew. Because I've seen you talk about it, or the public's seen you talk about it a little bit on social media and some of the things. Literally, just put in the hours, learn. You said then be a sponge. That's just knowledge transfer and humility, knowing you don't know all those things, because we do when we come out of university think, yep, we've got it all, bang. Um, that then moved you on to becoming a partner. That's a big step, man. Going from practitioner to business. Yeah, that's 2 different jobs. You're practicing and yeah, you're doing this business thing. How did that change your focus, and what did you have to learn for business?
It was a massive growth curve again for me, and still is. Like, business is an ever evolving thing. Not only was I, had my podiatry clients to look after now, but I had a team to look after, and people management's the hardest part. It's not, seeing the clients anymore. It's learning how to communicate with the team, especially with different personalities. Everyone responds differently to other things. Some people like it straight to the point. Others like a bit of fluff and a bit more nurturing. So it's learning how to be a bit of a chameleon. But it came about the buy-in process. We were out at our Christmas party one year, and I had a few drinks and I was like, look, Mel, this is what I want to do. I've always wanted to have my own thing. I want some more responsibility. I'd love to buy in. And she was like, oh, cool. Like, I didn't even know you were thinking of that. And she was like, how about for the next 12 months, we plan out what that looks like. And the end of that period, you can buy in. So during that 12 months, I had to tick off a few things, obviously do a bit more learning, learn how business aspects worked.
Yeah.
And then after that 12 months, could, yeah, start that buy-in process.
That's brilliant. It's interesting how that dovetails into, doing barefoot running as an example correctly. It's like you didn't go from day one practicing podiatrist to day two doing the books. It's a 12-month learning and growing process of all those things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I've had to do a lot of personal development too outside of podiatry. So work on my communication. I've got a coach that helps me with that and various other things. Because I realized when I got to that position of buying in, I was like, oh, I'm not the person I need to be for this role yet. I was like, okay, I've got to keep leveling up as the business grows. Otherwise, I'm going to be the biggest bottleneck here, not the team and not the clients. It'll be me. So yeah, that's been a massive learning curve that I think never ends.
That's interesting and so great to hear from a younger person. Um, when I was a personal trainer, and this was really back in the day, you know, all of us were like, well, you don't need a trainer to train because we knew it all. And it's changed so much now. I use at least 2 or 3 different mentors and programs for exercise, and I'm educated in it. And it's just so helpful to realize someone else's skill can assist you, and you got a coach for personal development. This is great. I was talking with uh, the Mill Gym, Nick Caldwell, another Special Air Service Australia guy, and he uses um, psychology performance, a psychologist for performance enhancement, getting ahead of those things. And we've always used it in those sort of elite roles. Let's get ahead of the curve. That's brilliant, and it's amazing that you managed to identify that small weakness there as well, Joe.
Yeah, it was when I was sitting in, I was in a one-on-one with the team member a long time ago when I first bought in. And I remember I was having a conversation. It was a bit of a tough conversation around like pay and hours and performance and stuff. I remember just what I was saying wasn't landing the way I wanted it to. And I
Right.
was like, they're just not perceiving it and taking it the way I'm meaning it to intend. And like that's not their fault. That's on me because I can't communicate what I'm trying to say as the leader. And after that day, I was like, okay, I can't just kind of rock up to work and now I'm a boss. Like I've actually got to do the work to become the person that can communicate with the team. So yeah, it's an ongoing process.
That's brilliant. I don't mean to keep going back to the unit, but when the CEO selects a member who passes selection, he states, for us at least, you're suitable for further training. So they pass the selection process and now they're into the pipeline of learning. What that means as instructors, if that person is failing a module, the CEO pulls us in. What are you doing? Because I said he was good enough and he's failing, that's on you. And that really spurred me to, if the message isn't getting received, I'm not getting it right. If I teach the same thing to 100 people and one person doesn't get it, my delivery was a little bit off. So that ownership of it, man, that's really rare to see. And literally, the best podiatrist in Australia, it gives a
Oh,
reason
look,
why.
mate, there's lots of good podiatrists, many better than me. I was happy to be nominated and go through the experience. But yeah, I think I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I've got a long way to go. So looking forward to the journey.
Man, that humility, awesome. It's gonna pay massive dividends. If I'm over your way, I'll definitely pop in and check out everything that's
Hey,
going on.
come for a tour. We'll get you on the anti-grav. Go for a run.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Yeah, gosh, technology. I feel old now. Look, Joe, it's been absolutely pleasure speaking to you and learning all about those things, sharing a bit of your journey, and hopefully someone's heard something there that can relate. I loved what you said there, and that uh, the 25-minute mark around the athlete triad as well. Um, uh, where do we find you on the socials, and where do we find the website for the clinic?
Yep. So business is PodFit Adelaide. So you'll find that online. Two locations, Modbury and Findon for those in South Australia and Adelaide. And then online, me, I'm just Joe Keain, no space on Instagram, and then Joe Keain Podiatrist on Facebook.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I didn't realize where you were. So I'll definitely get Dr. Dan Pronk, might get to run down to your way. He was the SAS doctor here for quite some time, and I'm sure you guys would relate well as well.
That'd be awesome, mate. I love to connect.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show, Joe. I really appreciate your time. Stick around, I'll hit pause and we'll have a chat.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, high performance living coach from hownottodie.com.au. And you can listen to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by realketonesaustralia.com, the best and most effective ketone supplement on the market to reduce anxiety, enhance brain performance, and supply twice as much energy as glucose. Thanks for watching.